Adit, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Good, good. Hi, Ashu. How are you doing?
Doing very well, and good to see you, right? We've been talking for a very long time, and it's finally good to have you with us
Yeah,
at the one-on-one sessions that we do at Asia Tech Journal, right? And this one is Venture Capital Futures. I'm particularly excited about this session, right? Given all the exciting work that you've been doing, right? And I think it's just become so much more intricate, right? Especially in the 1.5 years that we've seen around the COVID times, right? I think businesses have, I think, taken a very different shape, right? And I think that's essentially coming from the consumer behavior, the change in the consumer behavior, right? Thus, it becomes important, and these are interesting discussions, right? Especially with founders of general partners of early stage funds, right? Because you're literally navigating in an extremely difficult water, right? Which is gotten very a lot more opaque, right, than where it stood, right? The factors aren't very clearly visible, right? It's just become so much more complicated in that sense, right? So I think these conversations become interesting because then you get a chance to sort of understand the thesis, and basically how does one cut into the complexity that we're seeing, right? And also relevant from a founder standpoint, right? Because they're too close to the situation, right? This becomes more a mentoring for them to understand those complexities, how to deal with them, have a matrix behavior map, so on and so forth, right? So that's it. This conversation becomes interesting in that sense. But before we start, Adit, I'd love you to give us a quick round of introduction, and we dive into the session where we discuss about Gameba Capital and all the good work that you've been doing there.
sure, sure. Thank you very much for having me here, Ashu. My career actually started in 2006, in 2005, actually, around 16, 17 years of working. I started off with more on the international private banking side in the products division, managing alternative investments, private equity, hedge funds, real estate funds, got a sense of how private banking works. Then I actually was an entrepreneur in the QSR space. Not many people know about it probably. I started a QSR called Crepiteria in
Right.
2007, which is probably ahead of its time, before even the Swiggies of the world came in. And we were doing crepes and pancakes in Bombay. We actually raised some seed capital, expanded to 2 cities and almost 10 to 12 outlets, doing a bunch of other things. It was a great operating experience on the ground, hands-on experience, which has helped me till date. Right, I ran that for 4 years. Eventually sold it to one of my franchisees and moved to join a boutique investment bank. Did investment banking, learned the tricks of the trade, how to make financial models, how to make
Right.
IMs, how to sell. But I think my heart was always been on the buy side, and I wanted to be on the fund side. And
Right.
that's when then I joined Motilal Oswal Private Equity Fund. I was there for almost 4.5 years. Looking at 4 companies. So these were companies ranging from 200 crores top line to 3,000 crore top lines.
Right.
Seen the entire cycle from investments to exit and how a classic growth capital private equity fund works, right? Very, very closely. Uh, I was there till almost 2017 end, and then my second entrepreneurship venture started, which was Gemba Capital.
Right.
I moved. I think one of the very, very few people who moved from private equity to early stage VC, and I basically wanted to play a much more meaningful role. I think, and
Right.
I just felt that maybe I can play a role in the direction in which the company is shaping up when if I come on early on rather than investing in a 2,000 crore top line company, right? So plus with my background of entrepreneurship as well as investing, I felt we could genuinely add value to a lot of these young founders. So I
Very good.
started Gemba Capital, started putting small checks from the family office early on in 2018, 18 and 19. And I think somehow we've been able to add value in the companies. We've started getting good deals. Always from day zero, we wanted to set up a fund.
Right.
Our investment thesis started getting refined, relationships started getting built.
Mhm.
So the flywheel actually started, right?
Right.
And then eventually we decided that okay, now we should set up a fund. So we applied to SEBI for a license. We've got the license, and now we are here. Just recently, last week, made an announcement to set up a $10 million fund.
Awesome.
Have a good track record now. Have invested in 30 companies. This is where we are.
And we're going to talk more about that, right? But
Sure.
a very interesting one, right? And I like the fact that the way you sort of put it, right, where you move from a private equity setup to an early stage setup, right? And I completely understand that. I think in hindsight, you know, I'm sure that's possibly the best move that you've had, right? Given that a lot of these traditional businesses are actually becoming difficult, right? Especially in a digital environment, because I mean they're not necessarily prepared for an environment like that. I think even lot of large enterprises, for example, are finding it difficult to steer in a new unconventional setup. I mean, I'm not calling it unconventional right now, right? Because of disruption that just happened, right? But good move, right? A good choice
No,
in that sense.
absolutely. See, there were other reasons as well, not just in
Right.
terms of the stage of investing, but also in private equity, we were not doing so much of tech investments, right?
Right.
In fact, and whereas if you see around market cap of all the large companies in the world are tech companies, tech per se is changing how a common man lives, right?
Right.
And interacts with the environment. And I had like 15, 20 years of my career left. I wanted to not miss this bus in which
Right.
India is at present, and wanted to ride the wave. So I wanted to kind of be glued to the tech ecosystem and a tech startup space. And that was one of the reasons why I kind of made that move. In fact, I moved from Bombay to Bangalore for good for this, right?
Right.
So I think Touchwood till now, it's been a great journey since the last 3.5 years, and I'm sure it will be a good one going forward as well.
Interesting. Adit, I would love you to talk me through and walk me through, your, the current portfolio that you have at Gamma Capital. I mean, you've given me a construct, right? You're putting the fund together. At what rounds are you going to be participating? Are they going to be pre-seed rounds? Are they going to be seed rounds? What are the areas of focus, right? And tell me a little more about the portfolio that you've had in the past, right? I think you can possibly answer that first, right? And then we can talk about the capital path that you've
Sure,
taken, right? The
sure.
fund route that you've taken.
Sure. So we made around 30 investments. These investments are predominantly bucketed into, let's say, consumer tech,
Right.
fintech, SaaS, and what I call is B2B integrators, what commonly is known as B2B commerce, right? Vertical commerce.
Right.
These are the spaces where we've done around 30 investments till now in the last 3 years. Some of the names would be in the InsurTech side, we've done Bima Pay, which is now known as Virac.
Right.
We've done Plum and we've done SureClaim. I think we are one of the few funds who've done 3 in the InsurTech space.
Right.
We've done 3 on the alternative investing side within fintech, wherein retail investors can invest in asset classes beyond just public equities or debt or. So here it is Growfix, which is now known as Vint Wealth, Strata, which is into commercial real estate fractional ownership, and Grip
Right.
Invest. 3 companies there. We've done around 6, 7 SaaS companies. Some of them are Finly, Zuper, ClickPost. Again, SaaS for India, SaaS for the world. Consumer tech, we've done one company in the edtech space called Crejo. We've done one agri-tech company called Unnati. So really, a combination of deals across these four, 5 themes is what we've done in the last 3
Very
years.
interesting. That's a fairly diverse set, right? Adit, what's the construct of the team, right? Currently, I mean, is this like a small team? Is this like a large team? And and I asked you this question. I typically don't usually ask this question, but for the diversity that you are with what you have in the portfolio, right? It's a fairly complex one, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, when you're dealing with SaaS, you're dealing with a very, very I mean, there are a certain behavioral cycle. There are certain tendencies that essentially it becomes very critical to understand those tendencies, right? What you're talking about, InsurTech, for example, is picking up in the country, right? That is again a very, very complex play, right? Fractional ownership, and those investment opportunities, revenue-based investment opportunities like this, right? They're extremely interesting areas, right? I mean, how have you been managing all of this?
Yeah. So, luckily for me, I've got a great team in place. One of my team members, Kamini, she is completely glued on the SaaS ecosystem. She's written a few blogs on SaaS and kind of understands that space well.
Right.
So that's where I have taken her help when it comes to investing in SaaS companies. We have another venture partner called Vipul, and Vipul basically is a fintech founder who sold his fintech business and exited. And he is very, very much involved with us as well. So all the fintech transactions, we have his help, right? Plus, we have certain venture advisors. We have Upeka, who's like a SaaS, catalyst in the country. Again, to help us on SaaS. I understand consumer tech pretty well because of my past experiences, right? So I think within the team, we are comfortable with doing these 3-4 investments in these 3-4 categories. And that's why from the fund also, we are continuing with the same, and we've not really like added a lot more categories. And we need to understand when we're looking at pre-seed and seed rounds, the basic tenets of evaluating of a deal remain the same, right? You need to have a depth in a subsegment in a market which you probably have built a thesis on. And if you already have a thesis, the decision is always a high conviction bet, right? So that's pretty much the way we've kind of managed this this portfolio, and it's a very conscious effort to kind of do it this way.
Right. Very interesting. Adit, I mean, I think no conversation today can actually go without talking about COVID. I think COVID is an extremely unreal, situation, right? While of course it's been extremely, difficult at many for many people at a personal level. I think for each one of us, it's touched us in some way or the other.
Yeah.
But I think from a business standpoint, I think it's been an absolutely massive opportunity, right? I was in a conversation where one of the investors, mentioned, right, that this being a reset opportunity, right? It's like, somebody's pressed the reset button and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, the market is kind of fresh, new, no baggage, right? We're just moving at a very different pace, right? And arbitrage between cities is actually, our markets have, gone, right? Or is kind of diminishing much faster, right? So I think there are some very, very interesting points that are there. But before I ask you that, right, what I would love to sort of understand is, at what stage are you partners? I mean, you alluded to this fact, right, that you are coming in at a pre-seed seed level, right? But what is the typical check size, right? What are you, what are some of the key pieces that you look at? Because, at that point, essentially a business is infancy, right?
Yep.
It's very difficult to sort of predict many, many things, right, in terms of how it's going to play out and so forth, right? What are some of those things that come together? So your check size, I'd love to know a little more about that. And what are the pieces that you look at, right, for this to come together efficiently?
Got it. See, our average check size is going to be $250,000, right?
Okay.
And that's the first check. And we always we have a 35-40% reserve ratio to kind of follow on in our winners, right, and double down to maintain our stakes, right?
Right.
Pro rata. So that's the first check. In term and coming to your second question on the evaluation piece, I think you need another 3-hour session just for me to tell you how we evaluate companies at that stage. But broadly, I think there are three areas where we very, very keenly look at it. One is the founder market fit.
Right.
Because see, PMF as it has not happened, right? It's going to take some time, till Series A happens. But
Right.
founder market fit is important for us because what we're trying to assess is this founder the right kind of founder for this kind of a business, right? Founder, when I say founders, right? Also.
Right.
So we've built a framework internally. In fact, there is one of our blogs on our website. You can always go and check that in terms of what we look for and how we assess, right? And that becomes a critical aspect because in the end, when we're looking at pre-seed seed rounds, we are really riding on the jockey, right? We're really riding on the founder's ability to take this through and ability to build product, right? And get the GTM right. So that is one area where we are focusing too much. We're focusing a lot on the founders and his background. And the second is the market, because no matter how good a founder you are, if the markets are bad, you will not be able to work it out, right? And I've seen that in the past in my private equity experience as well as in the 30 companies portfolio which we've done in the last 3 years, right? So market becomes important again. Market timing, the growth in the market, the size in the market. Because if the market is not sizable enough, then obviously Series A, Series B becomes very difficult because large VCs would want large outcomes, and that can only be that you can only get in large markets, right?
Correct.
So then our assessment is more on the market. And in certain cases where we are investing post-product, and a company already has some early signs of revenue, then obviously how that quality of revenue is, what is the momentum, what is the velocity of sales, what's the growth, those things come later on, which is the traction and that piece. So if I have to kind of, prioritize it, it's founders, then market, then traction, defensibility or the product itself, and then finally the pricing, right? That's the flow which we follow internally.
Very, very interesting. I had, I found it very difficult, right? Especially early stage investing when you're kind of, you're coming in and you're kind of say participating in a certain company, right? Now, typically India, like I said, is a large market. It's a complex market, right? And I think COVID has kind of added to that complexity. And like I said, I'm going to discuss the COVID piece separately, right? But for an early stage fund, what I find extremely difficult is the mortality, right? Given that it's fairly early stage, the market is still to be programmed, and you're banking on the founder, fair enough, right? But there's there's always a huge credibility crisis, right? And for the sectors that you're kind of going in, right? At the end of the day, today in a world of awareness, right, world of information, the first thing that any consumer does, right, is just go and check online, right? And existence then makes a huge difference, right? Credibility becomes a huge problem, right? There are just so many facets to it, right? The possibility of survival is minuscule, right? It's extremely difficult. How do you solve for that, right? Given liquidity has been good, right? So I think if you, but this is an aberration, right? This is not something which continues to survive, right? How do you solve for that? How do you factor that in, right? What are some of those indicators that you think work brilliantly, right? In an environment where it's a baby which is coming out in a commercial world, right? What's your sense of that, right? I mean, how do you cut that, given that you are coming in at a very, very early stage, right?
Sure.
Second round, that's a huge gap, right, between those two rounds, right? A lot has to be proven between that, right? How do you see that as a complexity in the work?
Just to clarify, you're talking about credibility or immortality or mortality?
I'm talking about credibility leading into mortality.
Okay, fine. So, see, there are various ways to probably do this, right? And obviously, we are not going to get everything right. All of
Sure.
us know if there is a certain amount of power law which plays, and out of the 30 companies, probably 5 of them will shut down, right? Or even in the portfolio, right? But that's the game which we are in, right? The way we look at it is what kind of a business is it, right? And try to construct an entire portfolio which manages the risk return on the portfolio level. So I'll give you an
Right.
example. Let's say if there is a company which is a vernacular content company, right, which is completely not going to monetize for the next 1 year, 2 years till the time
Sure.
they get a million, 2 million users, right? So now we know it's a high risk investment, right, wherein there is no monetization till a certain point, and the company is going to be dependent on the next round of funding,
Right.
right, for it to kind of survive. Now, if we are taking a bet in this kind of a company, right, we at the same time would also keep in mind that we should also, to kind of compensate this, also have a bet in a company which has a positive unit economics from day zero, right? Which probably is a SaaS company which
Interesting.
probably will not die down so soon or so early, right? Even a 4-member team can run a SaaS company and run it profitably, right, and bootstrap it, even if the next round of funding gets delayed, right? So you kind of balance it out on the overall portfolio, which only a fund manager can do it, and probably not so much an angel investor can do it, right?
Right.
So that is one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is obviously when we're looking at it, making an investment, we are already talking to the next level of investors. So we are already talking to the probable Series A investors and what do you think about the space?
Right.
Right. And what do you think about how is it going to happen? So
Right.
those kind of insights also play a role in kind of figuring it out, right?
Right.
And besides that, obviously, it's just the nature of the business, right? Whether the business model can run
Right.
its own feet, the founders are well connected, well networked. Can they raise the next round? Can they build a good team? All those things kind of come together to make a
I know
decision,
what you
right?
mean. Yeah.
And
It's
even
not that easy.
it's not that easy because obviously none of us know what the future is, right? In
Right.
terms of how these companies would play it out. But you kind of get certain indicators, right? Like in terms of whether this will work in India or not work in India,
Right.
whether, like for example, in our 30 companies, there have been only 2 shutdowns,
Right.
right? And we've got almost 2021 up rounds, right? So I hope we're kind of doing few things right, and we probably will continue to do that.
No, interesting. And I think this is this is a conversation. This particular point is one which where you can talk as much, right?
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to reserve some of those. I am itching to ask a bunch of questions, right? But I'm going to reserve
Sure.
those questions for our next conversation, right? I'm going to move on to COVID, right? And I think COVID has been very, very interesting, right? From a business opportunity standpoint, right? And it's been like a mega booster for anything tech, right? Because consumers at all levels were now essentially communicating and consuming through tech, right? Thus it became a very integral part of it, consciously and subconsciously, right? And I think it's not many traditional companies have been prepared for it. They were essentially working and operating in a very archaic, physical,
Yeah.
offline way, right, of doing things, the startups which were essentially digital were always prepared for an environment like this, right? And this just came in as, like I said, a boom, right? But what do you make out of it? I mean, what I want to understand is this is something which has increased the complexity for somebody like you in your shoes, right? Who's investing in these opportunities, right? Because my fear is, right, and when I look at a lot of digital consumption, right, content is something which is reducing the arbitrage between, say, markets in terms of exposure, right? And that essentially means that the aspiration is going to be very different. The change in consumption patterns are going to be much faster, right? Which essentially means that a lot of investments that one is making are going to be at risk. Will not necessarily have the kind of life that you typically look at, right? For it to peak, for the value to get created, right? Companies will now have to have a much sharper approach, right? There'll have to be a product portfolio, a suite of sorts, right? To kind of deal and tackle with the consumer. This might also have a very strong rub off in a B2B ecosystem, which essentially means SaaS and enterprise tech, right? Because even those systems are built to deliver for a long-term play, right? With changing expectations, changing product profiles, right? There's going to be huge stress across the board. What do you make out of this kind of a situation, right? Well, of course, to start with, it's been very interesting, but going forward, it's going to get extremely complicated. What do you sense out of this particular
See,
situation?
whenever there is chaos, there is an opportunity.
Right.
Right? Without chaos, there is no opportunity.
Interesting.
And whenever for investors like us, what we need to do is make sense out of this in terms of what are the underlying behavioral changes which are going to
Right.
happen. Once you've been able to identify that and kind of apply that to your investing thesis, I think you can get and pick up the right
Right.
investments, right? Now, overall, I feel what COVID has done is just proven the superiority of a tech model, of a tech business model, right?
Right.
And I think which is a good sign for everyone, all of us who are in the tech ecosystem, right? And from a founder's perspective, it has only made them more resilient, right? It
Right.
has only, as you rightly said, got the reset button and got them thinking again on their business models, right?
Right.
So I think these are good things which have happened, right? Obviously, what the bad things which have happened are sector specific
Right.
micro markets, right? Which again will come back to its normal size, right? Because we as humans are not going to change with COVID in terms of, you know, let's say going out or going out to eat or travel. Those, all these industries are going to bounce back, right? So there is no question about that. What it's going to happen is going to bounce back stronger because because of COVID, they've already cut down their costs, they've become lean, they've removed the flab, right? So now when they come back, the margins are still going to be the same. And because your costs have come down and are not increased, you are actually going to make higher margins, right? So I feel everything is going to, according to me, things are only going to go better from here, right? And the complexity is only going to increase in terms of change in user behavior, right? So for example, at tech, for example, gaming, for example, content companies, you know, these companies really got a shot in the arm, right? Because of COVID. Now, whether this will continue or not is what the founders and the investors need to think. Whether this behavior is here to stay, are the children going to be continuing to kind of be in front of their laptops or screens, or they are kind of itching to go back to schools and will not be looking at screens going forward, right? So these are the fundamental questions which people need to understand the impact of COVID, right? And how things will work. Now, for example, let's take SMBs in India, right? SMBs in India now have no option but to go on the cloud, but to digitize, but to adopt SaaS softwares. Gone are the days where you used to kind of run the entire show only on Tally, right? So there I see a fundamental shift happening, right? Where all these small businesses are going to adopt SaaS, right? Products from India, right? Whether it's mini ERPs, whether it is a payroll processes, whether it is anything else, right? And you see a slew of these companies coming up, right? Whether it's SMBs or whether it's on the retail side, a Pagar book or a Dukan or you know a Khata book or whatever. So adoption in the change in behavior is some of them is permanent, some of them is transient. You need to understand which is what, and then accordingly take bets. And accordingly, the founders will have to kind of rethink of their business models because I think that's how things will move going forward.
Very interesting. Another interesting, event which has happened, right, is essentially an event of liquidity, right? I think this is something which is being discussed in many forums. While of course, on one end it, kind of relieves a lot of pain, and that pain is essentially of capital. But what essentially also is doing is that, it's just making, uh, everything very expensive in the sense that, for example, customer acquisition costs are going through the roof, right? Talent is again becoming very expensive, right? Uh, there is a lot of that which is happening, right? In a way, it's being justified as the new mode, right? Your ability to basically continue to corner talent, right? It is becoming very difficult, right? And my sense is that could possibly increase the mortality in a much higher way, right? So assuming there are 10 companies that are operating in the same space, 2 or 3 go on to raise capital. For the other 7, it's going to become extremely difficult, right? What's your sense out of it? What do you make out of this liquidity condition? I mean, for me, it seems to be an aberration, right? Because there are lesser vents which are available where this capital can be channelized. Plus, we're a fairly shallow market when it comes to our cost of acquisition, stuff like that. Right? I mean, you can move this market with just about a few $100 million, right? Where are in fancy as a market? What do you make out of this current situation, right? Is this a healthy situation? Is this a sustainable position? Is this something that should continue to go on? What I mean, how do you cut it, right? It becomes important to understand that, right? Because I think the organizations and startups will have to be designed in a certain way, right? To basically address if there is an overwhelming liquidity which is going to exist for the next 2 years, right? Founders will have to think completely differently. What's your sense of this?
Yeah. So see, let me answer this in 2 ways. One is a broad macro level
Sure.
in terms of how does capital probably flow and how does it impact.
Right.
And second is probably at the founder level, right? Like in terms of a specific business, what it means, right?
Sure.
So see, first on the macro level, clearly capital is going to flow to India, right? We are the second largest market when it comes to startups, right? After, if we exclude China, right, after US. So where will the entire global capital flows happen, right? If they've already exhausted their limits on US allocations, right? It is going to come to India. So there is no doubt about it that our ecosystem is thriving because of that, and a lot of money is going to come. When this capital comes to India, obviously you will see overvaluations, you will see companies raising more than they require, you will see valuations going through the roof. These are all part and parcel of the entire event of capital coming in. Whether it's good or bad, in the end, it's good for the founders. Because more the capital, higher the outcomes, the end outcomes, right? And better the end outcomes, better their money is going to again circulate back in the startup ecosystem. We've seen founders with liquidity coming, putting in back into the ecosystem as angel investors or as LPs in funds. Whether it's good for innovation or not, definitely yes, right? India has always been a capital-starved country when it comes to R&D expenditures and innovations. If more capital is coming in, more innovative products are going to get built. People are going to take that bets, brave bets. People are going to spend money on building products which are not existent earlier, right? Whether it's in consumer or deep tech, whatever, right? So in a way, higher capital kind of leads to higher innovation and better founder outcomes. So it's good. Now, when it comes to a micro market, right? Whereas the example which you gave, whether there are 10 companies and 3 of them are very, very highly funded, and what happens to the remaining 7, right? That is something, again, the question there to ask is capital a moat itself, right? Now, it again, if you're in a consumer tech company, right, or a consumer facing B2C company, and you've raised a lot of money, it will be very difficult for your competitor to survive, right? Because you will be able to give higher CACs, you will be able to sustain longer, you will be able to grab market share. It's a land grab initially if it's a new space, right? And you will be just able to throw the competitor out of the market, right? Just because of sheer capital, right? But take the same scenario in some other industry, right? Let's say a SaaS company, right? I don't think so. Capital is a moat there, right? Because in the end, higher the capital does not mean you are able to build better product. Does not mean that you are getting the GTM right. Probably you're getting the GTM all wrong because you are doing the GTM because of the kind of capital you have, right? And it's not a sustainable way to kind of run the company. So in certain cases, it will act as moat. Certain cases, it will not act as moat. So you have to decide as a founder in which industry you are, right? And what the industry ecosystem and the dynamics are. And if it is something where you need capital, then you obviously go out and raise as much capital as you can. But if you think too much of capital can actually weaken your foundation rather than making it strong, and you'll not be able to grow it the right way, and it's not something that if you don't raise too much capital, you'll go out of business. You probably would not raise so much capital. And you've seen examples of founders who've not raised too much capital yet doing fantastically well. So a micro market capital acts very differently. Macro level, it acts very differently, and I think it's important for people to understand this part.
Right. Interesting how you put it. Right. Like I said, I mean, there are I would have loved to sort of question you on the macro and micros that you kind of identified, right? Because I think all micros are essentially being into a macro, right? And all macros continue to kind of basically work on the directions of how micros are going to continue to perform, right? So I think they're very strongly interrelated. But I'm like I said, I'm going to reserve some of my questions for our next conversation, right? A fun question, right? What are some of those observations that you've had, right, which completely surprised you? And you said, which was completely, say, your thesis was A, and what you observed in the market happening was completely opposite of that, right? What's been that, right, during these times?
That's a tough question because I have to think over it. Where we've got wrong, okay, that's what in a way it is, right?
No, I'm not saying you're wrong, right?
It's in terms of our thesis or in terms of other trend or something.
Right? I'm saying it's completely unexpected, right? It just kind of blew you, saying, "Oh shit, we didn't observe this, right? We didn't know this is going to happen, right? And this happened."
Crypto. I can give you an example of that because we felt that it's too early. There is a lot of time left for crypto to become mainstream. Probably 0.01% of the world understands crypto. So it's still not gone mainstream, and we still have a time to build our thesis, right? And what has surprised me is the adoption rate in crypto. It is just crazy, right? Like in the US or even in the millennials in India or the Gen Z in India, people are comfortable talking about NFTs and this coin and that coin, and people are talking about DeFi's. and people are, and funds have already started setting it up and making
Right.
investments, large amount of investments, theses are starting getting built. So it's moving so much faster than what we thought, right? Even the Indian 2-3 companies, whether it's WazirX, CoinDCX, CoinSwitch, Kuber,
Right.
all of them, what we felt that, they'll raise money probably 2022 or 2023 is just happened now.
Right.
So I am again and again surprised always by the speed at which things move in the tech ecosystem, right?
Right.
And we have to be early on, right, in these things. So I think this was something which was very surprising, and probably what we were trying to build an internal thesis on crypto in 2022, probably we'll do it now.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah,
In a way, you walked into my next sort of question, right? I was, which are, and crypto is an interesting point that you
yeah,
highlighted, right? I mean, I have a thesis around crypto, right? I mean, I find it to be, I have just too many questions, right?
yeah,
To get convinced to be investing in crypto, right?
yeah,
And I think, it's an interesting area, right? I mean, I'm still questioning a lot of people around,
yeah,
why are you investing in it? What's the thesis behind it? What's the fundamental of it, right? I mean, that, like I said, there are so many questions around it, right? I think there's just being money which is being poured in to convince people to come in and participate, right?
11,
But I think
yeah,
the jury's still out. I think the jury's still out, right?
yeah,
In terms of how it's going to play out. But I think it's something which definitely needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of communication. People need to understand better, especially for a country which is, where the financial literacy rate and your equity as part of your overall savings is about 3-4%, right? I think there's a lot more literacy that needs to be brought in around the newer instruments that are coming in. I think there's a lot of buzz, but I think understanding and foundational pieces need to be right. I think for an environment like this is
yeah,
how I feel about it, right?
yeah.
But Adit, what are some of the areas that you think are going to be exceptional, right, in the next 2.5 years, right? What's your thought around that, right? Which are some of the areas that you think are going to perform, exceptionally well, right? Of course, SaaS enterprise we've been talking about, right? But what are, say, on the consumer side, right? Which are some of the areas that you think are going to be, complete outperformance, right? And they should be kind of watched for. People should look out for them, possibly understand them better, right? What are some of those sectors that you are kind of you think are
Yeah.
getting interested?
See, from an investor's point of view, I feel a lot more is going to happen on agri-tech side.
Right.
On fintech, always every year, if you ask me this question next year or the next year or the next year, I'll always going to say
Right.
fintech, right?
Right.
So fintech is always going to be there,
Right.
just because of the foundation and the growth drivers, right?
Right.
On the consumer side, I think D2C is something which people are very positive about.
Mhm.
I feel that has a great opportunity. That's a great
Mhm.
opportunity.
Right.
Although we personally don't do it, but that's a great opportunity.
Right.
And I think on the gaming side, the sheer size of the market the country has and the penetration, we see
Right.
a lot more happening on the gaming side.
Uh-huh.
These two on the consumer side, fintech, agritech as a sector, and a lot of disruption on the B2B marketplace, SaaS,
So
these kind of things is what we are going to look at in the next 2-3 years. And obviously crypto, as I said, initial stages, but a lot more action will happen.
interesting. I love your excitement for crypto, right? I think there's a lot of possibly a lot of work that you and your team are putting together, right?
Yeah, it's
And
still in the process.
could
It's
could we
it's
could we could we see a few investments coming in that space?
maybe yes, maybe yes. But we are still cautious, as
Right.
like all other investors. We still have to build our thesis completely, right?
Right.
Because there are different layers to it, right? Do we take a bet on a business as a layer on top of a blockchain or a crypto, or do we take a bet on the core crypto
Right.
side? On do we take a bet on the, let's say, on enablers side or analytics side on the
Right.
crypto? There are a lot of things, right?
Right.
So we still not come up with our thesis. Probably we probably will release it in a form of a crypto
You know, my,
series or a
my
blog or something.
right.
And
But
then in 2021, 2022, probably we'll do some
my
investments.
my biggest fear is the systemic risk, right? That's there towards crypto, right? I think one policy move, and I think it could just hurt the interest of many people, and that's a to me. I think if I'm to sort of put my
Yeah.
fears, I think in crypto, I think that's going to be possibly number one, right? And I think that's largely that. I'm sure many others who are operating in that sector kind of understand those complexities.
See, the thing there is, regulation always follows innovation. It's
Right.
never before innovation, right?
Right.
So anything new which comes up, whether it was internet or whether it was anything when it was in its infancy stage,
Right.
people had these questions, people
Right.
had these concerns. What will happen to privacy? What will
Right.
happen to this? But regulations will follow up, right?
Right.
And regulations will come up to kind of make things in order. So
Right.
as of now, if you ask me whether the regulators are anti-crypto, I don't
Right.
think so.
Right.
It's just that even they are trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this and how do we kind
Right.
of make this work. So that's where even I think that's what my thought process is on.
I have a view on that, right? But I'm gonna, like I said, there are like a bunch of questions I'm gonna reserve for next conversation.
Yeah.
We're towards the end of our conversation, Adit. I'm gonna move into our essentially second last question. What do you make out of Bharat, right? Like I said, I think COVID has been largely responsible for this entire, the cutting down on the exposure gap that existed, right? The arbitrage that existed between, say, a tier A and a tier two, right? And I think tier two is, in a way, and tier three is kind of now catching up, and much faster than we kind of anticipated. I think we have still, certain issues, right, in terms of our savings base being low in those areas, opportunities still sort of coming up. I think those are some structural issues that we need to tackle, which I think the government is essentially geared to sort of solve. They are sensitive about that fact. But I think aspirationally we're matching, right? Consumption-wise, we're matching. Tier two is contributing much faster in terms of, say, content consumption, content generation, right? So I think we're becoming a one large market, right? Something that, a lot of people have continued to kind of not operate in India because of the complexity that we were, right, as a country. But I think today, essentially, we're moving in a very homogeneous environment, right? There are certain predictability which is coming, and we've seen that in form of liquidity. What do you make out of Bharat, right? What's your sense of Bharat
Yes.
and its contribution in the tech innovation ecosystem?
Yeah. See, when we use the term Bharat, the first picture which you get is a tier two, tier three city or
Right.
something like that. I feel there is a Bharat in every city. Like there would be pockets of Bharat in Bombay itself
Right.
or in Delhi itself, right?
Right.
So in a way, it is these new class of, let's say, people who have access to internet, access to
Right.
smartphones, and increasing disposable incomes, right?
Mhm.
And it's a large market, right?
Right.
So obviously, none of the founders or no one can ignore it, right? And there is a different way to kind of crack those markets, right? Which
Right.
is different from the other TGs and the other segment. It's only good that the gap is reducing, because as you rightly said, there will be a little bit more homogeneity in the entire country rather than the complexity. But India is still such a large country that within Bharat, there are multiple Bharats and you have to kind of look at each differently, right?
Right.
There is every 10 kilometer, the dialect changes, right, in
Right.
India. So every 10, 20 kilometers, probably, if you go to a village, every 10 kilometers, the dialect changes, the food changes,
Right.
things change. So it's a difficult market to kind of capture. But those who are able to understand it and reach out and capture, they're the ones who are going to definitely win, right? And one way to kind of do that is be on the ground, like Gemba, right? Like be there to on the ground to see and experience, and then figure out what are the problems and go after solving the large ones, right? Rather than just kind of pulling out some data and doing some number crunching and figuring it out, yeah, let's go for this TG types, right?
Right.
You need to understand these people, which is very important, I feel.
Right. Interesting. My last question to you, right, is, what is your suggestion, advice to founders? I mean, a lot of people sort of, shy away from giving advice, right? So I mean, I have a suggestion, right? If there is one, for the kind of markets that we are in, right? I think, to me, founders need to be a lot mature, a lot sharper, right, for the kind of audience that we're dealing with, right? But what would that advice that you would want to give, right? Given you are somebody who's taking that risk of investing in many early stages, right? What is it that you would want to advise them, saying, this is something that you could possibly do, before they get down to raising capital, right? What will that advice be?
My one advice, which has always been there, is listen to your customers a lot
Right.
more than what you probably doing it right
Mhm.
now. Everyone's going to give you advice. The VC is
Right.
going to ask you to do this, do that. Your colleagues will probably be thinking of something else. But in the end, it's the feedback loops which you create from your customers, right?
Right.
Is what is very, very important, right? As long as it's in line with your mission or your vision and in the same direction, on the same track,
Right.
you kind of keep listening to them and keep improving your product, because that's the best way to kind of build anything, right? If you do that, everything else will as it is fall in place, right? Whether it's funding, whether it is profitability or a business model, you just need to kind of not work in a silo and keep very very much in touch with your
Right.
customers, which
Very interesting.
when things are growing very fast, you kind of tend to low prioritize it or ignore it or hire someone else to do it, which is not right.
Very interesting. Adit, it was a pleasure to have you with us in this conversation, right? I
Same
think, I
here.
think, I think, I think there are a few facts that I loved about this conversation, right? I think, given that you've operated in the private equity environment, given that you operated with some of those large enterprises, right, who deal with very, with India, right?
Yeah,
They're not, you know, I love the calm in our conversation, right? You're not necessarily, when you're talking to typical, anybody who's say participating with the tech ecosystem, right? It's kind of swayed by what tech can do, right?
yeah,
What they tend to forget on many occasions is that listen, India is a market which exists for the longest time, right?
yeah,
It's not something which is going to give up its tradition and say certain behavioral tendencies that we have, right?
true.
Overnight, right? It'll take
Yeah,
forever, and I think that's a calm that I could see in our conversation, and I think a lot of possibly of that is reflective in the way you are sort of cutting it when you are investing in many of these companies,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's extremely heartening to see, right? It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Lovely interaction with you.
Same here.